Hey, everybody. In this episode of the Men for Life podcast, I'm talking to Frank Pavone, the National Director of Priests for Life. We talk about men, we talk about masculinity, we talk about the role that men have in the abortion fight and the obligation that men have to step into this fight and to not sit silently on the sidelines being passive, how that is a failure of masculinity. We're also talking about the church and what the church can do better in the fight against abortion, the need for the church to speak from the pulpit about abortion so that they can help people in the pews to heal and so that they can help to prevent abortion in the future generations. I think you guys are going to really enjoy this episode. Before we get started, I do want to tell you, if you like what we're doing and you appreciate our content, please support us. You can go to menforlife.org. We have a donate button. Every little bit helps us to produce this podcast and to do the work that Men for Life is doing. Right now, we are working to create a fatherhood curriculum to distribute to pro-life pregnancy centers. So again, go to menforlife.org, donate, but enjoy this episode with Frank Pavone. Father Frank, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning, Sean. I'm doing great. It is really good to be with you.
We really appreciate you joining us. I think we have a lot to talk about. I know in conversations before we started recording that, we're on the same page about several things, and I'm excited to hear, what your take is on these things, and more importantly, what the solution is, like how to move these things forward. But before we get into that, if you don't mind just giving our viewers kind of a brief rundown of your work, what you're doing, how you got there. I know it's a lot, but if you can break it down for us, we'd appreciate it.
Be glad to, yes. Well, I grew up in New York and I got involved in the pro-life movement when I was about 17. This was back in 1976. So I went to the third annual March for Life. And it was so inspiring. It woke me up to the abortion issue and to the movement that was fighting it. A diverse movement, joyful families, people of all religious backgrounds, all ethnic backgrounds, all ages, and confronting a very terrible evil and yet so happy and joyful. So I got involved in the movement. And the more I got involved as the years went on, the more urgent this issue of abortion became to me. At the very same time, I felt a call to ministry, so I went into seminary. I was preparing for the priesthood. I got ordained to the priesthood in 1988, and then I served in a large parish in New York City. But again, during all that time, I was hammering on the abortion issue, and the more I did that, the more people responded. Bottom line is that I came to the conclusion that I had a calling to deal with abortion full time. And it was so strong and it was so clear and it was so certain. I went to, at that time, the Archbishop of New York, who was also very passionate about the abortion issue, Cardinal John O'Connor. And he gave me permission to make pro-life work my full-time ministry. An opportunity opened up right just at that same time to head up a very new group called Priests for Life, whose mission was to help clergy open their mouths about this issue and mobilize their people. So I took over that organization in 1993, and I've been doing it ever since.
And what does Priests for Life do?
Well, this is a ministry that is multifaceted, educational and pastoral. So we teach the public, we teach the people in the church, we train the clergy of all denominations, by the way, not just Catholic, to deal with this issue, to preach about it and teach about it, to counsel folks both who think they have to have an abortion and also after abortion. We, in that arena of after abortion, we have taken under our umbrella Rachel's Vineyard, the largest ministry in the world for healing after abortion, as well as Silent No More, which is a campaign that formed through Priests for Life and our collaboration with Anglicans for Life. And that's the people that share their testimonies, not only the moms, but the dads as well, which of course we'll talk about, and others who have been wounded by abortion too. So it's a ministry of education, pastoral care, counseling, healing after abortion. And then we have several other branches of Priests for Life, which include broadcasting, publishing, and also political and legislative activity. So we have a C4 called Pro-Life Vote, and we work to elect pro-life candidates and then to help them actually govern in a pro-life way once they're elected. And all that activity has been taking place under a marvelous team. We employ 50 people, and like I say, I never get tired of doing this work. And our team travels and speaks. I'm on the road about 80% of the time, and going from one event to another and getting that pro-life message out there.
So that's a lot of years doing the exact same type of work, staying in the same lane, right? One of the questions that I think that people get asked a lot, or one of the things that happens a lot in conversations, especially with people on the other side of the aisle, is they'll ask questions like, if you're pro-life, and this has happened to me. I have friends who are very liberal, and this is how they respond to me being pro-life. If you're pro-life, then give me your stance on the war in Gaza. If you're pro-life, then give me your stance on immigration and ICE detentions, and this has been happening a lot over the last couple of days. Finally, I told this person, look, for the third time, this is where I'm spending my time. I'm spending my time on ending abortion. Like, I cannot spend my time ending abortion and spend my time worrying about, or trying to solve, I should say, immigration, trying to solve the war on Gaza, trying to solve all the injustices that anyone may see. So for as long as you've been doing this, to stay in this lane, to stay focused, what have you found to really help you to kind of keep that singularity of focus?
Oh, yeah. So, Sean, this is a great question, and it points out a common problem. The first thing we have to focus on is, what is the issue? Pro-life, the term pro-life is often too big for its own good, because if you say just pro-life, of course we're pro-life in the sense that we're in favor of life. But unless we define the movement more specifically, we get caught up in exactly the kind of challenge you mentioned, because when you think about it, every issue, if it's going to be an issue at all, is a pro-life issue, because if it doesn't deal with how it impacts human life, why is it an issue at all? I mean, I find it very interesting to talk about, the temperature on the planet Jupiter, but unless there's a connection there with, like, is that going to impact human life on Earth? It's not really an issue. It's a curiosity. Now, these other things that these folks are mentioning, of course, they're issues. Of course, they impact human life. But then again, by that definition, every issue is a pro-life issue. So we can't conduct a movement just by or run an organization or fulfill a personal vocation if we're just saying, well, I'm in favor of life. That would be like the CEO of Delta Airlines saying, I'm in favor of transportation. Well, of course you're in favor of transportation, but does that mean are you running an airline? And if so, which airline? Are you running a train company? If so, which one? So the issue has to be well defined, and the focus of one's vocation has to be well defined. And as we do this work, no matter how long we do it, we have to keep bringing ourselves back to the basics. Sometimes people say to me, Sean, well, you're dealing with abortion full time. Boy, that's a hard thing to deal with. And I say, no, it's the easiest issue in the world. You sum it up in just a few words. You don't kill babies. Period. That's my issue. I'm trying to stop the killing of babies. And some people think, that problem isn't worth somebody's full-time focus. Well, I just say to them, think again, because of course it's worth our full-time focus. The other thing to bring up when they raise these questions is that these issues like immigration or war involve a different moral calculus. So people will say, well, what about immigration? What about the situation at the southern border? I say, well, look, if we had clinics being set up at the southern border where immigrants were being beheaded, decapitated, thrown in the garbage, deliberately killed, then you would start to be on the same terrain as the abortion issue. But if what you're talking about is, what's the proper way to take care of people who want to come into the country, that raises a whole host of other questions which fall far short of the deliberate killing of an innocent human being. People are dying at the border, they're dying in Gaza, but that doesn't mean somebody is being directly, deliberately killed, or that the policy question is, should we allow the direct, deliberate killing of somebody? So that's where you have to start helping people understand the difference of the moral calculus of these issues. And then again, whether they understand those differences or not, what you said is exactly hits the nail on the head. Listen, this is what I'm called to focus on. If you're called to focus on setting up soup kitchens, I'm not going to criticize that at all. Nor am I going to criticize the fact that that's your calling. Go fulfill it. Other people are called to witness against the death penalty. Go do it. Go protest outside the execution facility. I support you. But those are some of the considerations when we face those objections.
I like that, and I think that's really important, because I think that anyone in the pro-life movement, and I now understand and appreciate how you're saying that the term pro-life is so broad, but I'm going to keep using it just for the purpose of the conversation. So anyone in the pro-life movement, is going to be faced with these types of things, and it's really kind of just a distraction, right? Because if we're and that's almost like a part of spiritual warfare, because if we're getting distracted from the main issue, number one, then the main issue must be really important. If the main issue, saving babies, is not what people want to talk about when they're talking to people whose life is dedicated to saving babies, then that must be important to the point where they want to pull you away from that. And I think that's one of the ways, that the devil works, is by distracting us from this mission. And so,
and sometimes people will raise that challenge because they're trying to make it a political point. They'll when you think about the divide, Republican, Democrat, a lot of times people say, "Oh, look, the Democrats, they're fighting for the immigrant, or they're fighting for the poor," and they'll try to raise these questions to make a political point. So we've got to call that out too. I mean, we can. We can sniff that out, whenever it comes across, and we have to call them out on that and say, look, if you're really concerned about human life, let's talk about human life. Stop making it just a partisan thing. The other thing about it is, some people will ask you and me, well, why are you focusing, on the unborn? And my answer to that essentially is, well, because Roe v. Wade focused on the unborn. That was the only group of people that was deprived of their right to life. Many other things affect the quality of people's lives, and people can die from all kinds of causes, but it was only the children in the womb that were deprived of their legal right to life, their legal consideration as persons. And so, of course, we're focusing on them because that's the problem we're trying to solve. So it's like, don't blame us for focusing on the unborn. If Roe v. Wade had said teenagers don't have the right to life, then we'd be focusing on teenagers. The focus was decided before we got into the battle. We got into the battle to solve the problem that had arisen.
Yeah, and it really is just about whether or not we're going to value human life. Just like you said, with the example of teenagers, it's the issue of, hey, we're completely devaluing human life, and in this instance, if we devalue human life at all, then we devalue human life overall. Well,
Sean, in that regard, I knew Mother Teresa of Calcutta. I was privileged to get to know her pretty well in the last 3 years of her life, 1994 to 97, which were also the first 3 full years of my leading Priest for Life. So I went over there to Calcutta. I would call her on the phone. We would talk about pro-life strategy all the time. And one of the things she said, and she said it publicly many times too, is exactly the point you just made. And you may remember her 1994 speech in Washington, D.C. at the National Prayer Breakfast. She challenged, Bill Clinton was president then, and she challenged him and all of us by saying just that thing. She said, if we allow that a mother can kill her own child, how can we tell other people not to kill each other? Pro-life is a principle that if you break it at any point on the spectrum, in as much as not just of people dying, but of people being actually deprived of their right to life, so that it's okay to deliberately kill them, You break that at any point in the spectrum, you've broken it at all the points in the spectrum. Another way that I say it is, unless the unborn are protected, we are all in danger.
Right. So for me, like, and I think this is what you said about yourself too. For me, that's why this is the issue. That's why this is the issue that it is so important to me, because I believe that that by if we can change the hearts and minds of people to where we are once again valuing the sanctity of life at all stages, then we're valuing the sanctity of life at all stages, you know. And so now we can move forward onto the next issue, right? If we solve abortion, you know, I mean, I got plenty of time left, I hope, before I go. So, you know, if we can solve, and this is what I told my friend, if I do the work I'm doing and we put an end to the issue that I'm trying to end, then I'm going to find something else, you know, and I'll move on to the next one. But it will be one thing, you know, it'll be one thing that I'll focus on until that one is solved.
Well, you know,
And
even the cardinal, you know, in the Catholic community, people sometimes talk about the seamless garment, or they call it the consistent ethic of life. And this has been a teaching that has circulated within the Catholic Church for decades. And sometimes it's been used against the pro-life movement. But even the cardinal who first articulated that, Cardinal Joseph Bernardin of Chicago, also gave a number of talks, and these are all on our Priests for Life website, where he said exactly the point that you and I are making here. He said, you know, first of all, issues are different, and secondly, each person has to focus on what he or she is called to do. Nobody can do anything. Nobody should pretend to do anything, because then you're going to do a lot of things not too well. Focus on the one thing that's your main issue and do it well.
yes, I like that. And so, on that same note, you know, and with the idea that pro-life is all-encompassing, and that solving abortion will lead to solving other problems, either directly or indirectly, you know, that's kind of where to get to the next thing that you and I had talked about. That's where Men for Life, and that's where I personally believe that the solution, as we stand today, with all the work that's already been done leading up to this foundation, the solution is to raise good men. The solution is for, you know, we're approaching that from two different angles, right? It's really three different angles. And one of them is the post-abortive healing, which is really important, because what we've got is we've got all these men, millions of men who have lost children to abortion, who believe they can't talk about it, who, because they're suffering in silence, aren't able to serve themselves, their communities, their families in their full capacity, because they're dealing with significant trauma, you know, believing they're the only person that is dealing with it because nobody's talking about it. And so if we can get them talking about it, you know, then we've got them, they're going to be the most active force, right? And then we've got this middle ground of men, between the men with the unplanned pregnancy, who are not the men who have lost a child to abortion, but who still are passive and silent, you know, and we need to get them to be active and to live outwardly, you know, with biblical masculinity, so that we can reach the young men. Because if we can reach the young men, and we can show them an example of what it means to be a man in a way that is pleasing to God and to community and to family, then we're going to raise a generation of pro-life men, whether that's the complete direct intent or not, because they're going to value life. They're going to value their significant other. They're going to value women overall, right? They're going to value children. They're going to value community. They're going to value something greater than themselves. And so, so I had told you that was one of the things I wanted to talk about, and I was really excited when you said that was something you wanted to talk about too. So I'm excited to hear your thoughts. Sorry,
Well, you know,
got on a rant because this is my passion.
This is a passion of mine as well. And my team, by the way, at Priests for Life, as I mentioned before, including Rachel's Vineyard, of course, the healing of the men is a big part of our work. And Kevin Burke, whom you also know, is one of the experts on our team about men and abortion. But let's look at this in the broad perspective of the problem. Okay, so you got babies being killed. Why do we have babies being killed? So often, it's first of all because of the absence of the man. absence, either physically, and he's totally out of the picture, or emotionally or mentally. It's like, the mistake that, as you know, Sean, so many men make when they say, oh, it's your decision, I'm going to leave it up to you. This false deference to the myth of the other side, a woman's right to choose. Right to choose to kill your baby? No, I don't think so. So the man is not supposed to bow in some kind of reverence towards that. Although, some of the guys that talk that way, they're sincere, but they're sincerely deceived. It's not that they're trying to do evil, but they've been convinced that, well, if she's pregnant, well, it's up to her. It's her choice. And from the point of view of the woman, that only puts her in more isolation. That only increases the temptation to abort, because what she's receiving, what she's hearing from that is not respect and deference, but abandonment. It's like, oh, you're leaving this decision totally up to me. She realizes it's a life and death decision. She realizes it's a life-changing decision. Oh, you're leaving it just up to me. Instead, what the man has to do is say, well, wait a minute, I have a responsibility here, and I'm supposed to be a protector, a defender, a helper. The approach I have to take instead is, you know what? I'm here with you. But this doesn't mean that they're supposed to be together for life, or that they're supposed to get married if they're not married. Those are separate questions. The immediate problem of, okay, we didn't plan to have a baby here, but now we have one. The baby's in the womb. The immediate problem is solved by saying, I'm with you. We're together in this, and we're going to see this through in the best way for us and for that child, not pitting one against the other. And we take even a further step back and say this whole problem of abortion is not simply solved by saying no abortion or by having policies that prevent it. That is part and parcel of it. We've got to do that. We've got to stop the abortions. We've got to have laws that protect these babies. But if we look at the big question of how do we ultimately solve this, it's the family. God has planned for human life to come about in and through a family, a one man, one woman, bound together forever in marriage. And that's the only stable, logical, humane way, safe way, one might say, of bringing another child into the world. That child is completely dependent, not just in the womb, but after birth as well. And there's got to be some kind of stability there, which, of course, we know in our society now is sometimes the farthest thing from reality. But that's ultimately the solution. So for us to say or to buy the idea that, oh, this is just a woman's issue, really, that phrase and that mindset reinforces the other side. It reinforces abortion, because it reinforces the isolation that brings it about in the first place, just a woman's issue. Oh, so in other words, if she says yes to that life, that's still just a woman's issue. Where's the man? Where's the family? Where's the support system? And and where is the self-giving love? Again, it's this vision that the Christian gospel sets forth, that life comes about through love, and life is for the purpose of love. So two people saying to one another, this is my body given up for you. Two parents then saying to the child that's conceived, this is my body given up for you. And of course, those words are said by Jesus himself when he teaches the meaning of love before he goes to the cross. This is my body given up for you. That they're really the words that define what love is. And the man, of course, it's not just, oh, let's get men involved in the pro-life effort. It's that the man, the calling of the man, is absolutely essential. It's an integral, foundational aspect of the family, of humanity, of society, and of the pro-life solution that we bring into this terrible landscape of abortion.
Amen. So I've got three kind of subtopics on this, and I'm just going to give them to you, and then we can approach them however we go. And even if we don't get to all of them, that's fine. The first is, how did we get to this point where men, grown men and young men, don't know what it means to be a man? The second is how do we I guess that's kind of the same as why are men not more involved in the pro life? Like, what's holding them back in the pro life movement? And then the last one is how do we solve it? How do we get them involved?
Right. I think we have to remind people that when it comes to losing the sense of what it is to be a man, this is not something that has just happened. This is something that is the result of a planned, deliberate, sustained, vicious attack from what we might call the left, for lack of a better general term. But there are forces, and have been for a while in our society, that want to destroy the family. And to destroy the family, you have to destroy the understanding of what it means to be a man and the understanding of what it means to be a woman. Now, the radical feminist movements that we've seen over recent decades have destroyed the concept of what it is to be a woman, but at the same time, they've taken aim at manhood and vilified it, and we see it even now. The crazy notion on the left of toxic masculinity and whatnot. Well, no, we need more masculinity in the family, in politics, and in the church. So we think about the vocation of a man, but we've seen this outright attack where if we're forceful in any way, really taking leadership, whether it's in the family, in the church, or in politics, people talk about it as mean or as oppressive or toxic in some way. No, we need forceful leadership, initiative. I think when I think in the world of politics, what President Trump has been doing, whether people agree with all his policies or not, you see their decisive, strong leadership that gets things done, that's not afraid to defend, that's not afraid to advance, that's not afraid, frankly, to intimidate when that's a necessary tool to deal with an enemy that is threatening you, your family, your country, or your religion. This kind of clear, decisive leadership is what speaks into what we were saying before, a situation of an unexpected pregnancy and the fear and the despair that can generate. Clear, decisive, strong leadership stepping into that situation and say, here's what we're going to do. That's what we need in the political realm, leadership of a nation, of a city, of a state. It's no place for wimps. And this is what we need in the church. So many people, we're obviously a religious organization, and people come to us with the number one complaint and the number one question is, where are the clergy? Why aren't they doing their job? And we end up having this sort of a feminization of the clergy, whereby they don't want to talk about anything controversial. If you can't deal with anything controversial, and if you can't deal with the criticism that's going to come when you do deal with it, you're in the wrong job. And we need that strength coming from our pulpits, clear leadership. So we've come, in answer to the question, we've come to this point because it has been a deliberate target of the left, the purpose of which is to destroy the family, because the family is the cell of society. You have strong families, you have a strong society. Weak families, weak society. Well, why would they want to weaken society? Because they want to take it over. It's sort of ultimately it's a communistic kind of mentality that so many of these left-wing agitators have bought into.
So then what is the solution?
Yes. As we think about the solution to these things, it's on multi different levels, but the first, I think, and most effective is witness. We need clear teaching. There's been a philosophical revolution, that we've lived through, moral relativism, the idea that everybody creates their own truth, even to the point of, I'm a man, I could become a woman. I'm a woman, I could become a man. And that same lie is what we've been dealing with abortion. Oh, that's a baby only if I choose that it's a baby. Well, that's the same lie as saying I'm a man only if I choose to be a man. No, there's a biological reality that we have to accept. So a lot of this has to do with clear thinking, restoring clear teaching, philosophy, clear teaching in the classroom, clear teaching in the pulpit. There have to be policies that come into effect to start to fix all of this. And that's where the whole political battle comes in. But witness, and what I mean by that is, so we say, okay, we have to have strong men, and we can outline, as we're doing a little bit here, what does that look like? But then we have to be able to point to real men. There's what I'm talking about. There's an example. And to raise up examples and to give witness, and for men to speak out and to say, I am fulfilled and confident and happy in my calling, living out my calling in my life. And let me tell you why. People see it, and when they see it, they know it, and when they hear it, they can affirm it. And young men need these witnesses. They need these examples so that they can say, I want to be like him. Women need the same thing. And families need the same thing. Families need to stay strong and to stay faithful. They need to see other families that are strong and faithful. That's why we always emphasize in our work, whether it's in our presentations, our broadcasts, our publishing, whatever, our websites and social media, to use those platforms to spread these good testimonies and witnesses and examples as much as possible. All of this is essential, and a strong country with a strong economy is going to go a long way to helping resolve a lot of these problems too. We're starting to see that now on the political landscape in America, where we're saying, you know what, we got to help families be families. We've got to give incentives to people to be married. We've got to give incentives for the men to stay involved in the lives of their spouses and their children. I know a man, Viktor Orban in Hungary, who's been leading that country for many years. He and I have gotten to know each other on the international scene, and he has brought a great deal to Hungary for the restoration of family and the protection of life by some aggressive government programs that have given financial incentives to parents to have children. They get tax breaks once they've had, I believe it's 4 children, and no taxes. And so the kind of political incentives like this by people who, like Viktor Orban, really believe in that vision that we were tracing a moment ago. Like, what is the family? How are we meant to live? How is human life meant to come into the world? So these are, I think, some of the elements towards a solution to all of this.
And you mentioned the witness. You mentioned the setting example. And I wrote about that this morning because I think that we have we have examples of masculinity. And I'm referring to people, and it's just easy. It's easy to say Andrew Tate because it's recognizable, and who he is and what he stands for. But he stands for himself. He's a man who stands for Andrew Tate. He's a man who stands for self above everything else. And then you can get the money, you can get the car, you can get the women, self-indulgence, self-pleasure, and that's what it means to be a man, like to stand up and demand that everyone look up to you and listen to you and do what you say. And what we really need, is men who stand for something greater than themselves. Men who are standing up and saying, I don't have to demand that you respect me, because when I walk into a room, you can tell that I command respect, because I'm not here for me. I'm here for my family. I'm here for my community. I'm here for my mission, which is something greater than me. And I'm here for God, and so getting these men who are currently in many cases passive, and I would suggest that there are men, because it's easy, who are good men who are looking at the next generations with disdain, and feeling like we're lost. And this has probably gone on for all of eternity. but looking at the next generation and saying, well, we're lost because these boys don't know how to be a man. But the problem is that they're not standing up and saying, hey, this is how you be a man.
This is how you do it. Yeah.
Right. And because these boys are looking to Andrew Tate, they're looking to other people in that area because they want it. They're hungry for masculinity. And those are the only people showing what masculinity is. I would say there are other people coming out. I know, I don't know if you know Nick Freitas, but I think he's a great example of what I'm talking about. And he can inspire men of our generations and men who are young men to be a good man. And that's what we need more of, because that's how we reach the young men. And it takes a lot. The way that society is today, I mean, it takes putting it all out there, it takes putting it on social media, and a lot of times that's not something that people are super interested in doing, but it's really just living by example. And then, that gets put on video.
Yeah, exactly. One of the words that comes to my mind as you're saying all this is the simple word hope. I remember, I worked for a time at the Vatican after I had led Priests for Life for a while. They had me come over there for a couple of years to do some pro-life work on the international level. I was still running Priests for Life. And some documents would be coming across my desk every once in a while from the United Nations. And they were some of these documents dealt with demographic questions, not only childbirth, but family life in those nations. And it was interesting because I found one of those UN reports by demographers, and you would think that would be full of statistics and stuff. And it was. But they concluded, and they were kind of asking the same question that we're asking. They're looking at falling birth rates and what they call demographic winter. And, for the human race to survive, we have to reproduce. And they said, well, one of the key solutions is hope. Now, this was all the way back 25 years ago. Hope. And right now, some of our listeners may be aware, the Catholic Church has proclaimed a special holy year with the theme of hope. And it's like what you were just saying about men who are looking at the younger generation. Oh, they're not going to know how to be men. So we have to address that concern. It's a very valid concern. We have to address it with hope and say, you know what? We can inspire them to be men. And yes, we can turn this around, because hope is something that the human spirit responds to. And when change is in the right direction, we'll make the sacrifices necessary to change. So a big part of the answer to this question is hope. And that is a virtue. It's a Christian virtue. It's a biblical virtue. To have hope then gives us the strength both to welcome life, to build a family, and to be a man.
Yeah. And I think along with that hope, if it, like you just said, we can inspire them, and to understand that sitting around complaining about where the world's going because these young men don't know how to be a man solves nothing. So in order to inspire them, we have to take action. And that's part of what it means to be a man, to take action. And I believe not only that these young men and boys have a yearning for masculinity, because it's just built into us, right? And they have this yearning for masculinity, but many times don't know where to look for it. So they're looking. And I also believe that men in our generations have a yearning to lead young men into manhood, but maybe they didn't get an example of that. Maybe they don't know how to do it, And so that's one of the things that we at Men for Life are kind of focusing on is, our two main focuses right now are reaching the young men, but then the greatest tool to reach the young men is the men in our generations, leading them. And so reaching those men and calling them to action, calling them to step out. And so on that note, when it comes to men who, and I'm getting emails, the momentum is huge, and I know you've seen it because you're in this space and you're in the conversations. And so if I'm seeing it, I know you're seeing it. But the momentum is huge with the understanding in the pro-life movement on the impact that we can have by reaching men. And on the other side, the men are starting to hear it. And so I'm getting emails daily from men just reaching out through our website and saying, how do I get involved? What can I do? And so that's my question to you. If men hear this and they say, you know what, like I am being passive, and passivity is not masculinity, and I need to be active. How can I be active? What ideas do you have for how men can be active in the pro-life movement?
Well, first of all, to be informed about all the different help that's out there for the women and the children, because we need to be able to be a bridge. And like the example we were using before, the mistake so many men make. Oh, you're pregnant. Oh, well, you don't know if you're going to, have the abortion or keep the child. It's up to you. It's up to you. No, it's not up to you. We got to solve this problem together. And so one of the ways of being involved in the pro-life movement is to promote the resources of the pro-life movement. What are the, pregnancycenters.org, that website that connects people with the help that's available, the option line, where are the local pregnancy centers? Every man should know within his own community, wherever he lives and works, where those pregnancy center options are. He may have a friend, may not be a situation that he's personally involved in, maybe a friend, an acquaintance, a family member. What are you going to say at that moment confidently that there is help available? There are alternatives available. That's one thing. Secondly, just to be present and be involved in all the wide variety of pro-life activities. There are men's marches now, men's marches for life, and men have to lend their voices in the debate, in the leadership, come to the assistance of the pregnancy centers. Pregnancy centers are not supposed to be places where it's just, women helping young moms. The men have got to be front and center there too. There's going to be men. So often we see this phenomenon of thinking that these services are just women helping women. I go to these the pregnancy conferences every year of the three major networks, and there are a number of smaller ones too, that have these mega conferences. I'll be going to another one in just a matter of a few weeks. Heartbeat International, CareNet, and NIFLA. Thousands of people coming together who day by day are working in these pregnancy centers across the country. And, the men have to be involved in those kinds of efforts. And then all the other activities of the pro-life movement. We talked about the legislation, the political, even in the political realm, when there are debates on this, you and I have discussed the slogan some people use to intimidate men, no uterus, no opinion. Oh, yes, opinion, because that's a human life. It wouldn't have come about without a man. It's not going to be defended without a man. And of course, we have an opinion. It's not just an opinion; it's a fact that you don't kill babies, and we've got to stand up for that courageously. So, just the avenues are there for activity and for work to be done. And for men to, probably the biggest thing for them getting involved in this movement, get rid of any kind of self-doubt that this is an issue that not only you have a right, you have a duty to address it, and to address it vocally and strongly. And then we're going to be all that much closer to solving the problem.
Yeah. And so two things on that. One is, reaching the men in the pregnancy centers. I think that, like you said, a lot of times we hear pregnancy center and we assume that it's just women and babies. And like I said a minute ago, with the momentum that's going on and the understanding among the pregnancy resource center community and the pro-life movement, that the impact we can have by reaching the fathers in those situations. I had mentioned to you on a group call previously that at Heartbeat International, God spoke, to me and said, "This is what you're going to do now," because I had 104 different pregnancy centers stop at our booth and say, "We need a fatherhood curriculum," so they know. They know the impact they can have. And so we're formally announcing it next month at CareNet. But but we will have a fatherhood curriculum for pregnancy centers to be rolled out January 1st. And so, so there's that, teaching men how to be good, biblically masculine men, to be inspired to be a man, to be inspired to have value and to be inspired to have a purpose and a mission greater than self. But the other question that I got a lot and that I still get is how do we get men to help facilitate that? Because women aren't going to come in and facilitate a fatherhood curriculum for young men who haven't ever had a male role model and teach them how to be a man. Like, that's good, bad, or indifferent. That's how we got here, right? And so these centers need men. Like, if men want to know, how do you get involved in the pro-life movement? How can we help these young men? Like, go to the center. And if the center doesn't have a fatherhood curriculum, tell them you're interested in helping them to build one.
That's right.
Because they know, and they want it. They want the man to come in and volunteer, but they're having trouble getting it because men still see this as a women's issue. So that's just,
well, Sean, this is, you're again hitting the nail on the head. The question that arises for me when we ask this is, how are we as a pro-life movement messaging the general public about the role of men and the need for men in our movement? Let me give you an example from our own ministry. Early on, when I first took over the organization, we would have on our mailings, and we would mail out letters for asking for support. And it said originally, one of our folks that had come over from another pro-life organization had said, all right, let's put on the envelope, your support will help us save more moms and babies. Okay, sounds nice, right? But what strikes you about that? We're not just helping moms and babies. So I said, no, that we're going to change this. And now to this day, and for decades, it said, your support will help us save more moms, dads, and babies. It's just simple things like that. What kind of imagery do we use? Like on pro-life brochures, very often you'll see what? You'll see a mom and a baby. Okay, it's great as far as it goes. But why don't we have more images of mom, dad, and baby? Again, I think simple things like that go a very long way. The artwork, the pro-life artwork that we use, the memes that we post on social media, the wording that we use in our not only our printed mailings and brochures, but what about talks and events? I think you and I spoke about this off camera before as well. So many times when I've been at different, and let's say for example that maybe it's a pro-life press conference. Okay, so we want to promote a certain bill, for example, that would help save lives. And sometimes I hear, and you and others that are listening to us now likewise hear, the idea that, oh, well, let's put the women front and center. Let's just have, in fact, I've been at events where they've said, we're only going to have women speak today. It's like, why would you buy into the philosophy of the other side that wants to isolate the woman? We got to stop isolating the women. Get the men involved. Ironically, I was at one of those events one time. It was a press conference, and literally, the organizers said, "Well, only the women can speak. Only the women can speak." Except when they had the sponsor of the bill that they were promoting, which was a pro-life senator who was a man. I was like, "Oh, okay." Then they made an exception, but you can't. That's like, you're not going to make an exception. Your exception destroys the rule. It's like, you obviously have men that are leading the charge here and should be leading the charge. Now, that doesn't say, like I mentioned before, the Silent No More awareness campaign. Of course, we put women out front and center, of course, because they have powerful stories to share about how their abortion devastated them. But we've also got men giving testimony about how the abortion devastated them. So it's like, I think these little, they're subtle, but they're not small. They're small, they're subtle, but they're not insignificant. These shifts, these changes in language, in artwork, in wording, go a very long way. The men are going to start to get the message that this is my movement too.
Absolutely. And I think you touch on something that I think is really important, is that at the same time that the pro-choice side has been telling men, sit down, shut up, stay over there. You don't have a right to talk. The pro-life side, which I believe this is mostly in good faith, while focusing on women, focusing on babies, which is the ultimate objective, has ignored or overlooked the man. So while one side's saying you can't talk, the other side isn't saying you can.
Right.
And so by the other side, nobody's saying you can talk. Then there's, why would men believe anything different? They're only hearing one side. They're only hearing one voice, and the other side is being silent to them.
That's right. And Sean, who else hears that message too? The clergy. And this goes back to something we mentioned earlier when you were asking me about my ministry. It's like, wait a minute. If we're saying, either by action or by omission, if we're saying men shouldn't or have a voice here or aren't needed to have a voice, well, then that's a big answer to the question, why don't the clergy talk more about this? On the one hand, we're saying directly or indirectly, men don't have a voice on this issue. Then we turn around and wonder why the clergy aren't speaking up. Sure, there are female clergy, but most of them are men. And it's like, if you say that the men don't have a voice, then you're saying that the clergy don't have a voice. And then you're going to be surprised that the clergy are silent. They're silent because they're told to be silent. We've got to change that. And I think the more you and I and other groups like ours succeed in issuing a clarion call and saying, men, you are needed and you are needed now. Strong, clear voices. This is as much your movement as anyone else's movement. The more effectively we get that message across, I think we're going to see more men's voices rising up in those pulpits. And that is going to be key to our ongoing success.
That really brings us into the last thing that we were going to talk about today, which is the church and the silence of the church. This is something that I started really thinking about as I started interviewing people, and most of the people that have had this conversation with me are not Catholic. They are Protestant. And so, but the repeated theme is that we need to reach the churches. The churches aren't talking about this. And as I kept having these conversations, I started articulating that in 47 years, and I went to Catholic school, and we go to mass every Sunday. And in 47 years, I have never, not one time, and I know now from saying this over and over and over, I know there are priests who are vocal. I've just never been there, but I have never heard a priest from the altar talk about abortion, and I will qualify that with one thing, which is probably the Sunday after the Dobbs decision. There was a commentary on the fact that the Dobbs decision happened. Other than that, I've never heard anyone talk about abortion, and that's hurting people from two different levels. It's hurting the people who have been through an abortion and who are sitting there maybe believing, like I did for a very long time, that I was not going to be forgiven, that this was something that that was an excommunicable, offense. And, and I was so conflicted because nobody ever talks about it. Like in my head, even though I fought against it, even though like I wasn't an active, willing participant, it happened. And I, people say, well, you're always playing the victim, and I'm not playing the victim. I'm responsible. Like I'm responsible for that pregnancy, which means I'm responsible for that abortion. And so that's where the guilt comes from, right? That's where the shame comes from. And so sitting there, never hearing a message about it, it leaves the people in the pews questioning salvation, but also questioning whether they can talk about it. And then on the other end, you're not reaching the young people because you're being silent. And so if it's not important enough for the church to talk about, is it really that important?
Exactly. That's the impression that the people come away with. And, as I've spoken with pastors and dealt with this over the decades, and by the way, we have something that our audience might be interested in. Because we've dealt with clergy for so long on this very issue, I wrote a book called Proclaiming the Message of Life. And part of that book deals with about 30 different reasons why pastors won't speak up about this issue and how to lead them beyond those fears. So folks might want to check out that book. It's at that same website, proclaimingthemessageoflife.com. But the point that we often encounter with regard to the pain of those sitting in the congregation who have had abortions, and there's no question that they're there. Some pastors say, "Oh, maybe they might be there." No, they're there, and if they don't hear the pastor might be saying, "I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to hurt them." Okay, but if they don't hear anything about abortion, they're going to conclude one of three things, or all three. He doesn't know about my pain, or he knows but he doesn't care, or he knows and he cares, but there's no hope. And we don't want to convey any one of those messages. We do know, we do care, and there is hope. And so for the very reason that some are silent, that's actually the reason they should speak. You care about that person in the congregation, woman or man, mom, dad, maybe grandparent of an aborted child. You know they're in pain. Therefore, talk to that pain. Speak with compassion to that pain. When we train clergy how to preach on this, I always tell them you start with two things before you even get into the rest of the pro-life message. And the two things you start with are, if you think you have to have an abortion, we are here to help you with alternatives. And secondly, if you've had an abortion, we are here to bring you forgiveness and peace. So you're conveying right away, the pro-life movement is not a movement of judgment and condemnation. And many clergy don't talk about it because they don't want to be seen as judging or condemning. And I tell them, well, if you don't want to be seen as judging or condemning, then make it clear that you're not. Speak the words of mercy. Speak compassion. Don't be silent. Silence doesn't solve anything, and silence doesn't interpret itself. You're not going to get anywhere with silence. Speak, and speak clearly and compassionately. The silence, unfortunately, Sean, sometimes the silence of the clergy is forced on them. And this is a result of what we were referring to earlier, the lack of fatherhood, and how I mentioned, the lack of fatherhood in the church. You've got, cowards. If you've got a coward as a bishop, well, then what are his priests going to be? They're going to be told to be. It's kind of like, if a church is hierarchical, and certainly we have this in the Catholic community and some other churches, churches are either more or less hierarchical. But if a church is hierarchical, unfortunately, cowardice is sometimes imposed. And cowardice is taught. Certainly it's taught by bad examples, sometimes by words. And we see this also, another big obstacle for the clergy, when they think, oh, I don't want to get into political things. And sometimes they're told by their church superiors that, oh, well, you can't talk anything political. We might get in trouble with the government. Of course, that's a bunch of lies. That's ridiculous. And it's like they're afraid to talk because they've been told to be afraid. So we got to come against all of this, and it will be for the benefit of everybody. It will be for the saving of lives, and it will be for the we get rid of this kind of cowardly thinking, and it'll be for the growth of authentic manhood, like we've been talking about.
So, any advice for someone? And I'll just put this on me. So this would be someone who is starting. The more I talk about it, the more frustrated I get, and the more I feel like God is calling me to say something. However, I do understand the hierarchical nature. I also understand, the concerns about politics, and I understand that there's a nuance to approaching this. So before I go like full blast on my priests, in a way that may not help to push the issue forward, do you have any advice on how to approach that conversation in a way that doesn't just create an immediate break between the two people, but can lead to progress?
Yeah, appeal to them as a shepherd. They've been trained. Well, of course, if their training is halfway decent, some priests unfortunately have been shortchanged in their seminary training in the first place. But if their training has been relatively good, they've been trained as a shepherd. And so I think that, especially the kind of work that you do with helping the men and healing the wounds of abortion, we go to them as a shepherd and say, heal the wounds of your flock. Do you know the wounds of your flock? May I speak to you about the wounds of your flock? Sometimes what we'll do is take members of our Silent No More campaign who, as I mentioned before, are sharing their stories about the pain of abortion, and we'll let them come with us to talk to the pastor. And, it's going to be very, very hard for a pastor to reject somebody like that. If somebody, and a lot of times somebody comes along to a pastor, and if the impression they're getting is, oh, here comes somebody complaining that I'm not doing my job, then the pastor is like, I don't have time to listen to this. But if someone comes to a pastor saying, I'm a member of your flock and I'm hurting, it's going to be very hard for him to not listen to that. And then what is it that you're saying? You're saying as either a wounded member of the flock or as someone who's trying to help those who are wounded, you're saying, Pastor, you can help a lot here. Let me explain to you why. And so, like, for example, so many of the members of Silent No More will say things like, if I had only heard my pastor preach on abortion, I might not be dealing with this pain today. Because nobody told me, nobody warned me about the dangers and the devastating effects of abortion. I didn't hear it from my church. So, Pastor, could you talk more about this? Because you're going to help people avoid abortion in the first place. And then the second thing is, of course, hey, there are folks there, like we were saying before. They're sitting there. They're in despair. Could you help them? And then you bring to the pastor. I'm not just telling him, what he should be doing or what he might not be doing, but bring him some resources. Like you're talking about that curriculum that you're creating, and bring him the resource, because we can tell these pastors that, look, this is part of your responsibility, and we should feel free to tell them that. But then if we can bring along some tools that they can use, all the better. The book I was talking about before that I wrote about preaching, I actually give homily hints for all the Sunday readings of the entire year. And we bring them tools like that. And then we're going to be, I think, well received, that these men see that we are, we're not there, just like the person who's had an abortion, right? We're not there to condemn or judge them. We're not there to condemn or judge the pastor either. We're there to help them fulfill what God has called them to do. If we can convey that attitude, I think we'll make progress.
I like that, and I appreciate it. I think that another example of how pervasive this whole sit down, shut up, don't talk from one side and complete silence to men on the issue on the other side is, I'm speaking next month at a Catholic men's conference, and when I reached out, to the guy that's putting it, one of the team members, about something completely different. But I reached out and said, hey, I just want you to know, he's an attorney. I was like, I just want you to know I'm no longer practicing law. I'm now running this pro-life organization. So he was completely aware of that when he invited me to come and speak. And still, for months, I was really conflicted about what am I going to talk about, because obviously I'm talking to a bunch of men who are excited about being men. So I can talk to them about, what does it mean to be a man, and what does it mean to raise the next generation of good men, which is what all the other speakers are going to talk about too. But I was hesitant to bring up abortion because it's something that we don't talk about, right? Even though it's what I do for a living, and it's something that I do talk about. It was just that, and I finally recognized that, and I was like, the reason we don't talk about it is because we're not talking about it. And so I just made the decision that I'm going to make them uncomfortable, because discomfort is what creates change, and we need to create change, and there will be priests there as well. So just kind of trying to formulate my talk in a way that is not a condemnation of the silence, but is a call to action to no longer be passive, and not only on the part of the men in the audience, but also of those involved in the church.
That's the right approach. I affirm you in that decision, that we got to speak about it, and that's you're in that very moment of giving the talk, giving an example to them of what they need to be doing in their moments in other contexts where they're not sure whether to bring up abortion.
Well, Frank, I really appreciate, we are out of time. I appreciate you taking this time. I know that you and I are the only ones aware that we had some technical issues. And when we started this, I sounded like my kids had played with the sound mixer and I sounded like a chipmunk. But we got that resolved so that the audience is hearing my voice in its normal tone. So you're with Priests for Life. Just for I know you said that we can find that book, which I think is great. It includes 30 different issues about why pastors won't talk about abortion. I think that's a really helpful resource to anyone who wants to approach their pastor. In addition, and that's at proclaiming the message of life.com. Okay. And where else can we find you? How else can we support you in the work you're doing? You know, all of us are working in the nonprofit arena. So obviously, you know, financial help is always needed by anyone who's inspired to give. Outside of that, how can people help you? How can they support you?
Well, we have a main website called ProLifeCentral.org. Pro-Life Central shows all the different branches of our ministry. Like we were indicating earlier, I would invite people to come, sign up for our emails, and connect with me on social media too at FR Frank Pavone on all the major platforms, FR Frank Pavone, and be a bridge to us. The main way that people help us is that they are a bridge, whether it's to their clergy or to the other groups or ministries in their area that could benefit from the resources and experience that we bring. I invite people to see our broadcasts. We broadcast daily. They'll see all this on that main website, Pro-Life Central. And we invite the partnership. And thank you, Sean, for making us able to speak to your audience today. It's a real pleasure.
Yes, sir. And thank you. And I look forward to many more conversations as we continue to work to end abortion and to raise up good biblical men.
Amen to that.
I'm excited to be in this arena with you, Frank.
Amen. Likewise.
All right. And I will talk to you again soon.
Thanks a lot.